Dragon Heist Campaign Diaries for my Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition campaign. My name is Ray. The channel is Ray Tales. Session 3 picks up where we left off in Session 2. Most of the players' characters are on the second floor. Varen is down on the first floor, standing by the stairs, and Renard is still in the office where they initially found him and questioned him. It was established at the beginning of this session that one of the players had taken enough notes and found out from Renard that the Zentarum had thought that Renard's father had embezzled a large amount of money when he was the Open Lord of Waterdeep. That they could find this money using an artifact called the Stone of Galore, and that stone had been in the possession of the Xanathar Guild until it was stolen. The Zentarum nabbed Renard and Floon, and then in the process of a fight that broke out in the warehouse between the Xanathar Guild and Zentarum, Floon was mistaken for Renard. Renard was locked up, stuck in an office in the warehouse, and Floon was shuttled back to the Xanathar Guild, which the players will find out over the course of this session. So I didn't give much time to on in the warehouse. Near the beginning of the session, I had described to them that they had heard whistles off in the distance, which they correctly deduced to be the City Watch that was on their way. So hurried downstairs, did a quick search of the bodies that were down there, which were several, something like 4 Zentarum and 3 Xanathar Guild, or 4 Xanathar Guild, 3 Zentarum. I had to really look at my notes, figure it out. Plus the bird creatures that they had killed coming into the warehouse. They didn't do a whole lot of talking, which is fine. It's up to them. They didn't do a whole lot of identifying of their enemies either, which is fine. It's really up to them, and I'll talk about that at the end of this video. With the quick looting, they grabbed a few of the weapons. Renard armed himself with a rapier and a dagger. I think somebody grabbed some leather armor, and then they were getting ready to head out of the warehouse when Varen had noticed a section of the warehouse that either had never come into view or they just overlooked it initially. But she just happened to be standing in the right spot, noticed discoloration near one of the walls. She went over to check it out before they left. It's when she found the 2 crates that had paintings in them. The other box had trade bars that were in there for quite some time, and he quickly distributed the trade bars. They enough to put in 5 small sacks, I believe. They spread them out, put them in 5 small sacks. Each one carried a sack, and then a couple of them grabbed a painting. I don't know if all of them did, but I know 2 of them did initially. So then they tried to truck it out of the warehouse with Renard in tow. They were met at the entrance to the warehouse, but basically outside the fence. I mean, they were right there at the gate. Met the City Watch. So it was the City Watch with, I don't know, something like a dozen or so members, along with Eustace Staggett, the watch commander. How that resolved was I let them gather their stuff really quick, the stuff that they wanted to loot, and then they had a brief conversation, so it was pretty quick. But then basically I gave them dexterity saving throws or dexterity checks. I really don't remember which one it was. DC wasn't really that outrageous, but I needed at least half of them to succeed, and they would have gotten away before the watch got there. Half of them failed. Well, actually, I think more than half of them failed the roll. I think half of them failed to get over 10. And honestly, I think I set DC between 12 and 15. I think it was 12. So it should have been an easy roll. They got met at the gate by the City Watch. Basically, the City Watch told them, hey, you need to answer some questions. And they were taking notes, as they were asking questions like, who are you? Why are you here? And eventually they said, well, we rescued Renard because we're looking for this guy named Floon. Eustace and Renard knew each other. Eustace ended up giving the players the code legal so they understand the laws of Waterdeep. And they forced them to put the paintings down. Two of them had paintings, so both of them set it down and left it behind. He didn't question the bags they were carrying, or they had, attached to their backpacks, or he ended up cutting them loose, for a little while. Said, we'll come back. If you have any questions, we'll meet up with you in your room, or in, Yawning Portal, or ask you to come down and we'll talk to you more. Eustace told the players to keep the violence out of the streets. He really didn't care. Anything, as long as there was really no violence going on in the streets. If they wanted to explore the sewers, felt free, take care of sewer business in the sewers, and don't let it spill out into the streets. Okay, the PCs left. I was surprised that they did what they did next. Shouldn't have been, I guess. Not saying not really surprised. I was kind of surprised because they were in the middle of day 2 of it's actually day 3 of Floon being missing, but their first full day of investigation, because they rested the right after the tavern fight. So, but I asked them to give me a wish list of different items that they may want or come across in the adventures, or as we progress through the story, and I throw out various side stuff that is not related to the adventure. But Ranger Baron wanted thieves tools and wanted a spellcasting focus that she didn't have when she started, because she didn't cast spells at first, but then at level, which is fine. So she had a criminal contact. She called it Betty Boop, but I ended up keeping Betty, but spelled it like Beddy, and then Bup is her actual last name. That's her criminal contact. Runs a shop called the Midnight River, and they know for a fact that Betty has at least a sister. The one sister was actually working the front desk. It's interesting that the counter has enough room, basically 4 people to get abreast. So the counter's pretty much close to the door. There's an opening that can come in. They sit there in front of the counter, look at what's in the glass, or look at what's up on the wall, on the shelf, or hanging from the ceiling, or whatever, or hanging on the wall for sale. They had a little menu of items that they have. There's foodstuffs to potion, purple wizard's hat with yellow stars, and there was spellcasting focus, stuff like that. There's components they could get. I think it was less than 100 rupees or less if they wanted, certain components they could purchase that cost money that are to power some of the spells. There was chocolate chip cookies, sugar cookies, maybe peanut butter cookies, I don't remember. And meat pie that nobody bought. There's various potions. There was poison that she called rat poison when asked. That Betty's like, yeah, it's rat poison. But it was overpriced. But no, it wasn't overpriced, and they'll find out it's not. In the shop, Karn, the wizard, ended up buying the purple wizard hat out of the hands of Anvil. I think Anvil wanted the hat to purchase and then try to sell to Zablon because it was purple. Karn said, I'd like the hat, and got it. Varen ended up getting her spellcasting focus, her thieves tools, and I believe somebody bought a couple potions. I think one of them was resistance. Anyway, there's 1 or 2 potions. I'll have to look at your character sheets before we play tonight. Varen ended up buying chocolate chip cookies for everybody, and everybody took off. Back to the Yawning Portal to meet up with Renar. On the way back to the Yawning Portal, Varen wanted to buy a burrow, so she ended up getting a burrow with the pack saddle and the harnesses, or the reins and stuff to lead it. Back in the Yawning Portal with the burrow tied up outside to the pole, and then inside they briefly talked to Durnan, and then decided to take a short rest, cast a ritual identify, because one of the items that they bought for the cleric was 100 gold piece pearl so he could use it to cast Identify. Everybody thought that was a good purchase, put in 20 gold pieces each. Correctly identified the hat as a hat of wizardry. Karn's happy. One of his items on his wish list. He had the opportunity to buy it. Long after that, when Art came back, that's when the party decided that we got to find an entrance to the sewers that will take us to the Xanathar Guild. After some deduction and talking, they decided probably the best place was to go back to the Zentarum warehouse, at least in that area, and look for an entrance to the sewers. They found the entrance to the sewers. They entered the sewers and, wrinkled their nose at the smell. They headed down, splashing through the water. And they were in the sewers wandering for about an hour or so. It was getting to be late afternoon at that point on the fall day in Waterdeep. And they come across a grapefruit-sized creature with a bulging central eye and 4 stumpy eye stalks. It was just floating there next to a ladder. Saw them, screamed aggressively at them, and it didn't take very long. I mean, it literally was 5 against 1. It was a brief battle. There were some eye stalks that were, that connected with a few of the players. So they got a little introduction to some of these abilities coming from these eye stalk creatures. But then they continue on their way. And maybe another hour or so, they were in the sewers. They come across a circular corridor, go north or go south. So they took the corridor and they headed south. It wasn't very long. They found a ledge that contained a door and a wall that led to the west. So they ended up all getting out at that point. They missed the guards. But the guards didn't miss them. And one guard, now this is different than what's in the book, but one guard went to warn the rest of the hideout. The other one could have picked at them from range, but ended up trying to ambush them as they come through the door. Almost worked. It was a brief little battle. He got his shots in, what little shots he was going to get anyway, before they quickly subdued him. They ended up following the corridor going north, and eventually went down a little ways into a barracks. Again, they weren't moving quietly. If you know anything about the adventure, Zimk and Kris were in the next room. Into the room, and in one corner near a door, they see Kris, the bandit that actually was in the bar fight, who was one of the bandits that they knocked out in the bar fight, who got arrested, but obviously got out the next day. What they didn't see was the large, dark dwarf that had grown and cast invisibility on himself, and he was standing by the door with basically a readied action, and as soon as somebody popped through the door, he just whacked the shit out of him. It was effective. He got advantage on that roll. I don't remember if he crit. The previous 2 times he crit. Battle broke out. Party quickly dispatched Zimk. It was a pretty good little fight for a few rounds. Dispatched Zimk, knocked out Kris. They literally stripped Kris down naked and then hog-tied him because they didn't want to get him released again, I guess. I don't know. Or they're a little upset taking out their aggression. They're being mad that Kris was let out of jail the next day. So, whatever it was, that's where we left. So now, one of the things that I discussed with my players via Discord, or it might have been text message, I suggested to them that they might want to take an action to to identify some of the creatures that they're fighting. They may or may not know what they are. And we're going to establish that with the more common ones. I'll give them basically, I think the goblins, I told them they were goblins because goblins are easily recognized as goblins. Now, if they want to know what abilities these goblins have, then they're going to have to, take an action to figure it out. I believe that would be a nature check for them, for the goblins. So, I would even go to maybe diplomacy or history, depending on which one's higher. I really don't have a set thing, but nature for sure. History would be another decent one to figure out. Hey, what can these goblins do? These goblins may have typical racial abilities that all goblins have, but they can also have other abilities that not all goblins have. So the only way to figure it out is via they see it actually happen in combat, or they make this check, take the time to make the check. Depending on how high they roll, they can find out one or more abilities or weaknesses of these creatures, and each time they would do that and succeed on a high roll, whatever that is, they can learn more and more about the abilities. Now, obviously, another way they can actually research this stuff is after the fact, but that may be too late, because after the fact they've already probably been hit by some of these abilities. They're like, oh, that's an ability that. But they don't know that all goblins or all creatures of that type that they encounter would have that ability. But, they'd have a decent idea that, hey, if that one did, and there's a good chance that the other ones might to them. Sometimes it might be worth somebody taking action to try to figure out what these creatures are and what abilities they may or may not have. For whatever skill they need to identify that creature, they get a 10, they get the name, they'll get the type. So, for example, boom, nature, 10. Hey, that's a goblin, which I kind of gave to him. And it's a humanoid. Cool. But what about the things that look humanoid, that aren't humanoid, and that certain spells don't work unless they're of that type? So this wraps up the Session 3 campaign diary.